Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we are taking what feels like the ultimate intellectual shortcut.
Oh, absolutely.
We're plunging headfirst into a subject that really it touches every single interaction in our lives.
It does.
And that's the hidden anatomy of influence and persuasion. We're going to be dissecting the art of seduction.
And it's important to set the frame here. We're looking at this not as, a moral instruction manual.
Not at all.
But as a strategic one, a profound study of human psychology, power dynamics, and what the sources call a subtle psychological warfare.
That's precisely the mission, isn't it?
Yeah.
For you, the learner.
Yeah.
Our sources treat seduction as the ultimate form of power.
Ultimate, yeah.
Because it completely bypasses resistance.
Right.
It doesn't argue, it doesn't force.
It targets the mind. It goes straight for those deep-seated fantasies, your hopes, your insecurities. So today, we're really focused on unpacking the fundamental characters and, the cunning techniques required to master this domain.
What's so fascinating to me is the source material's insistence that this whole process is always indirect.
Always.
It's subtle and it's ongoing. I mean, the truly successful seducer sees every social setting, every single encounter as a potential field for influence.
You're never not seducing. That's the idea.
Exactly. You're constantly building momentum, refining your image, and creating this emotional current that just pulls others towards you.
And that attraction, it has to begin with your character. If your character radiates a specific potent quality, something that stirs emotions in others beyond their rational control,
then all your other moves become so much easier.
Exponentially easier. And the sources, they identify 9 core character types that possess this deep, inherent, attractive power.
And these aren't just, simple archetypes. They are highly specialized agents of desire. We're talking about the siren, the rake, the dandy.
The coquette, the star, the ideal lover, the charmer.
And 2 incredibly potent figures we absolutely must dedicate time to, the natural and the charismatic. We're going to analyze the mechanics of all 9, seeing how they turn what are often inherent personality traits into, weapons of psychological power.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's unpack those first 3, which are, they're maybe the most dramatic, starting with the siren.
Siren, right.
Historically, these are figures like Cleopatra, Helen of Troy, or the Chinese siren Cixi. Now, when most people hear siren, I think they immediately jump to breathtaking physical beauty.
They do, and the sources tell us that is a really dangerous misreading of their power.
A total misreading.
It absolutely is. The sources point out that the power of the siren is first and foremost psychological.
Okay, so how?
Well, they cite Cleopatra and Marilyn Monroe, neither of whom, was universally considered to have a classically beautiful face.
Right, that's a common misconception.
Their power lay in the image they projected, the illusion of a kind of goddess-like femininity, and the strategic game they played to isolate and destabilize powerful men.
So let's break that down. How does this strategy of retreat and illusion actually work in practice?
The initial phase, as you suggest, it's purely physical. It's visual.
Oh, the hook.
A hook, exactly. The siren constructs the image of a goddess, a woman of heightened femininity. She's using scent, clothing, movement, everything to appear ethereal.
It's a total sensory experience.
Total. And they show only glimpses of flesh, never the full picture, to keep that fantasy burning in the target's mind. This visual presence acts so powerfully on men, it just bypasses their rational processes.
That makes sense. I mean, it acts instantly like a lure on an animal. But the psychological masterstroke, that comes next, right? The actual retreat.
Yes, this is crucial. Once they have the victim's interest, the siren lures the man away from his stable, masculine world.
What does that mean, his masculine world?
It means drawing him away from war and politics, as the sources put it, the domains of logic, of duty, of public performance. And she draws him into a feminine world defined by luxury, refinement, and pure sensual pleasure. The classic example is Cleopatra isolating Julius Caesar on that leisurely, luxurious trip down the Nile River.
She wasn't debating Roman policy with him.
Exactly. She was drowning him in sensual indulgence. The genius there is the destabilization.
Right. By making the man's old world, his world of power and duty, seem suddenly crude and boring and, insignificant compared to the refinement the siren offers.
She shifts his entire frame of reference.
He becomes dependent on her for pleasure. For novelty.
Exactly. But dependency alone isn't enough. The Siren must then execute the crucial move,
Which is?
turning cold and indifferent.
The push-pull.
Right. Once King David was utterly hooked on Bathsheba, or Mark Antony was completely lost to Cleopatra's world, the Siren withdraws the pleasure and affection.
And that withdrawal, that sudden sting of deprivation.
It forces a man who is accustomed to controlling his environment into a feverish emotional pursuit. He goes from being a ruler to an emotional slave.
So that moment of anger, confusion on the man's part, when he realizes he can't control her, that's what seals the deal.
It is a sign he is profoundly enslaved to the emotional cycle that she now controls.
And the physical tools are always aimed at heightening this effect. I'm thinking of the story of Cixi.
Oh, perfect example. She was specifically trained to destroy King Fuchai.
And her training wasn't about politics, was it?
No, it focused on her movement, making her appear to float across the floor. This created an image so mesmerizing, so far removed from his daily reality, that the king became obsessed.
And he started prioritizing her pleasure over the welfare of his kingdom.
Leading directly to his ruin. The physical is the decoy. The psychology is the trap.
Okay, so if the Siren weaponizes this intense constructed femininity, then the dandy weaponizes fluidity, the rejection of gender and category entirely.
Right, a complete contrast.
So why does that refusal to conform create such desire in other people?
Well, the dandy appeals directly to a deep, repressed social frustration. I mean, most people feel utterly trapped.
Trapped by what?
By their limited social roles, gender expectations, their professional identities. The dandy, figures like Bert Brummel or Oscar Wilde, they signal that they have created their own persona, a living artwork.
And are therefore free of all these constraints.
Exactly. And this ambiguity, playing with masculine and feminine aesthetics, is profoundly alluring because it suggests infinite possibility.
It's the appeal of the person who has written their own script and is supremely confident in the result.
Yes, and that confidence manifests in their physical image. The dandy's style is always startling, distinct, and highly aesthetic.
Now that word, aesthetic, is crucial.
It's critical. It means thoughtful and refined, never vulgar or merely trendy. They poke fun at current trends, not by ignoring them, but by subtly elevating or distorting them. It shows a supreme disinterest in the mainstream.
And that detachment, paradoxically, is what draws the admiration of the crowd.
It is. So dandies seduce socially as well as sexually. Groups form around them, just wanting to bask in their freedom.
They create a kind of social gravitational pull.
Correct. People are drawn to dandies because they promise a glimpse of freedom. The idea that you, too, might escape the monotonous roles society has assigned you.
But the sources warn that this freedom has, well, it has hard limits.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the classic case of Beau Brummel and the Prince of Wales.
Nice.
If the dandy's impudence goes too far, it becomes pure insolence and the spell just shatters.
That anecdote is such a brilliant cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Brummel, he was relying on his wit and the patronage of the rather plump Prince of Wales, and he overstepped.
Massively.
The prince rang for a servant, and Brummel, ever the fashion stickler, mockingly asked, "Do ring, Big Ben." Oof. And that remark, it cut through the theatrical teasing, and it caused genuine offense to a man who held immense power.
And the prince dismissed him instantly.
And Brummel was ruined. It illustrates that theatricality only works when the audience, especially powerful ones, is still entertained.
It's a delicate measurement. You have to be different enough to intrigue, but not so insolent that you inflict a true injury on someone's ego.
A dandy needs to be seen as an amusement, a welcome distraction, not a genuine threat to social order or personal vanity.
Which means in our modern context, the dandy has to understand the rules of the environment they're in.
Absolutely. You must fashion yourself to be pleasantly distinct, not actively hostile or constantly critical of other people's choices.
All right. Moving to our third focus agent, the rake. So if the Siren is all about calculated retreat and the dandy is studied indifference, the rake is overwhelming, intoxicating, immediate desire.
The rake, yeah. Think of the Duc de Richelieu or Lord Byron. This figure is characterized by insatiability. Meaning for the period they are focused on you, they think of nothing else. This total, undivided, albeit temporary devotion is presented as a profound female fantasy.
It gives the victim no time to think.
Only to feel.
So why is that desire so infectious? What unconscious desire does the rake tap into?
They tap into the repressed desire for the forbidden, the dangerous, even the slightly evil.
The dark side.
The dark side, exactly. The very etymology is telling. Rake comes from rake hell, someone who rakes the coals of hell. The rake conveys a sense of risk and darkness, suggesting that by succumbing, the victim is participating in a thrilling, slightly wicked escapade.
It activates their own inner rakishness.
It does. The victim doesn't just feel desired, they feel exciting.
They feel special enough to draw the attention of this dangerous, constantly sought-after figure.
Precisely. And this leads to the rake's strategic genius.
Right.
Managing his inherent weakness.
Which is his disloyalty, his inability to commit.
Right. And how do they use that infidelity as a tool of seduction?
That's what I want to know.
They exploit the common tendency of others to believe they can reform the rake.
The I can fix him fantasy.
Exactly. When caught in a moment of rakishness, they don't apologize for their nature. They fall back on their weakness, the inability to change, making themselves seem like the lovable victim who needs help and understanding.
It's so clever.
They are devotional to pleasure and devotion itself, which often includes multiple partners. It's why figures like Bill Clinton could suffer public scandals and yet see women rushing to his defense.
They're defending the fantasy of the lovable yet uncontrollable devil.
That is a masterclass in turning a vice into a vulnerability that evokes sympathy rather than scorn. It relies entirely on reputation.
The rake's reputation is their greatest asset.
It has to be aggressively managed, crafted and displayed as proof of irresistible attractiveness, uncontrollable devotion to pleasure, and utter disdain for convention.
So they can't hide their conquests.
No, they have to publicize them. The Duc de Richelieu made sure his conquests were public knowledge. It created competitive desire in other women who wanted to be the next notch on his proverbial belt. This reputation has to be active and dramatic, or the magic just fails.
Okay, before we move on to the ideal lovers and the charmers, there are two types that we absolutely have to cover. They're foundational to the source material, but they're often overlooked.
The natural and the charismatic.
Exactly. They rely less on these constructed images and more on a kind of raw internal force. Let's start with the natural.
The natural, right. Often represented by figures like Colette or even, you could argue, Marilyn Monroe in her pre-siren phase. They rely on an overwhelming sense of authenticity and spontaneity.
So in a world that's so saturated with artificiality and calculation,
which we see in the dandy and the siren,
the natural stands out by appearing utterly uninhibited and almost childlike.
Exactly. So the appeal here is sincerity, but strategically deployed. It's the idea that they speak and act without the filter of social convention.
They communicate an innocence and a freshness.
That makes the victim feel less repressed in their presence. They project vulnerability, which is deeply seductive.
Because most adults spend their lives wearing layers of armor.
Right, and the natural allows them to glimpse a world where that armor is unnecessary. Their sexual attractiveness comes not from calculated display, but from seeming utterly spontaneous, almost accidental.
But here's the question. Doesn't true authenticity risk exposing every flaw and weakness? How does the natural maintain any mystery?
Because the natural only displays selective vulnerability. That's the key.
Oh.
They show enough charming weakness, a naive mistake, a simple burst of emotion, to signal humanity, but they never expose genuine neediness or insecurity.
The overall effect is like watching a charming child.
Exactly. You forgive them their flaws because they are so refreshing and seemingly unguarded. It provides the perfect contrast to the weary cynicism of adult life. The victim wants to protect them.
And doing so gets drawn in.
That's a powerful psychological pull, the desire to protect and instruct.
Okay, that's clear. Now let's pivot to the charismatic. This one seems like pure magnetism. It feels harder to define than the others.
It is. The charismatic is built entirely on a mysterious self-confidence. Think of figures like Gandhi, Joan of Arc, or even certain cult leaders.
Really wide range.
A very wide range. But they are all defined by an unshakable self-belief and a powerful, often unsettling sense of destiny. They are magnetic because they have mastered the art of being both strangely distant and intensely present.
That distance is key, isn't it? How do they maintain the magnetism while still remaining distant?
They maintain distance by being deeply self-involved, but in a way that suggests they're connected to something larger than life.
A higher purpose.
A higher purpose, a divine mission, or simply an understanding of the universe that others lack. When they speak, they use intense conviction, and they use silence as a potent weapon.
So it's not what they say, but how they are.
It's their presence. Their intense gaze makes the victim feel that the charismatic is peering into their soul, validating their deepest unspoken beliefs.
So they're not seducing sexually then? They're seducing intellectually and spiritually.
making the victim feel chosen.
That's the distinction.
The charismatic offers a profound connection, a shared destiny, a feeling of belonging to a superior cause or a superior person. They rarely explain themselves. They rely on gesture, mood, and intense emotional transfers.
They might just walk into a room and the atmosphere shifts.
And this inability to be rationally explained only enhances the sense that they possess some kind of mystical force, turning them into an object of worship.
So the natural wins you over with humanity, while the charismatic wins you over with a kind of near divinity.
A great way to put it. Both use an internal core quality to create an overwhelming external pull.
Let's look now at the seducers who operate by reflection and specific psychological filling, the ideal lover and the charmer. The ideal lover seems to be the master of deep customization.
The ideal lover's core strategy is intense focus. It often borders on a kind of radical empathy. They fathom precisely what the target is missing.
What dreams they've abandoned.
Or what disappointments define them. They don't just flatter, they hold up a mirror reflecting the victim's ideal self, appearing to be the literal embodiment of what the victim lacks.
And this is a subtle difference from the charmer, right? The charmer flatters your current ego.
Yes.
The ideal lover flatters your crushed ideals, the potential that never materialized.
Precisely. And the quintessential example of this is Madame de Pompadour in King Louis XV.
The famously bored king.
Notoriously bored. He cycled through mistresses who merely satisfied his sensual needs, and then he'd get bored again. Pompadour, however, realized the king was disappointed in his own reign.
He felt like a failure.
He yearned to be seen as a great, culturally significant leader, a French Augustus.
So she didn't just sleep with him. She became the curator of his greatness.
Absolutely. She appealed to his crushed ideals. She actively engaged in cultural leadership, patronizing Voltaire and the Encyclopedists, commissioning magnificent buildings.
She transformed their life into an aesthetic, intellectual court.
She made him feel great about himself. She transformed him from a bored nobleman into the grand patron of the arts. She made him feel a greatness he couldn't find in his daily life.
And that made her irreplaceable.
Utterly. Unlike the previous purely sensual mistresses, by fulfilling that internal gap, she cemented a psychological attachment that went far, far beyond physical desire.
And this strategy, it scales perfectly to political seduction.
It does. Think of John F. Kennedy's appeal to the American public in the late 1950s and early 60s.
Okay.
After years of post-war comfort and conformity, many Americans felt they had lost the adventurous pioneer spirit, the grand ideals of their past.
The era was comfortable, but, spiritually stagnant.
So Kennedy creates the Camelot myth. He introduces the new frontier. He wasn't talking about policy minutia.
No, he was selling a dream.
He was offering to restore America's sense of mission, injecting Hollywood-style romance and adventure back into politics. He seduced the nation by appealing to its collective lost ideal.
And that generated an emotional response that completely eclipsed any rational political alignment.
It did. And we also see the ideal lover embodied in the aesthetic courtship of someone like Rudolph Valentino,
Who essentially codified the romantic lead for cinema.
Valentino specialized in transforming courtship into an aesthetic ritual. He paid scrupulous attention to detail. The quality of the flowers, the thoughtfulness of the gifts, the patient rhythm of the courtship.
He created the feeling that the affair was lofty, serious, and uniquely special.
Exactly. And by comparison, the standard male suitors of the time, impatient, self-absorbed, expecting instant gratification, they seemed repulsive.
He elevated the act of pursuit itself. He made the woman feel like a heroine in her own romantic film.
Which is incredibly seductive because it elevates the whole affair above a mere physical transaction. It convinces the victim that they deserve this level of devoted attention.
That patient attentiveness makes the ideal lover a rare and valuable commodity.
In any era.
Now let's distinguish that from the charmer. If the ideal lover focuses on the past or future greatness of the target, the charmer focuses on making the target feel fantastic right now.
The charmer, yes. Like Disraeli with Queen Victoria, they are the masters of immediate ego validation.
So how does that work?
They win affection by constant flattery, making the target feel witty, vibrant, intelligent, and just generally better about themselves. They become a boon to their vanity.
Disraeli succeeded where other politicians failed.
Because he addressed Victoria not as a powerful monarch, but as a desirable woman. He softened her hardened exterior with genuine, repeated validation.
It's hard to reject someone who makes you feel powerful and secure, especially if you're surrounded by people who usually just challenge you.
Exactly. And the charmer ensures their demeanor supports this effect. They are unflappable.
Total self-possession.
Immense calmness and self-possession in the face of adversity. They never whine, they never complain, or show anger, all highly disruptive emotions that make others uncomfortable.
So the charmer puts others at ease.
By presenting a confident, self-reliant front, it suggests they can even charm the fates themselves. And this contrast with the flustered, angry, or anxious people around them is incredibly powerful.
But charmers aren't just pleasant conversationalists. The sources say they must also be subtly useful.
This is a crucial practical point. Charmers make themselves subtly indispensable.
Like Pamela Harriman.
Perfect example. She understood that her wealthy, powerful husband, Averell Harriman, was deeply Spartan and, frankly, bored by the management of social life.
So what did she do?
Pamela created a luxurious, invigorating, and socially strategic environment for him. She managed his world so seamlessly that he couldn't imagine functioning without her.
She created the network, the aesthetic, the comfort. She became the indispensable engine of his lifestyle.
And globally, charmers create a network of allies by connecting people and creating opportunities. But here's the ultimate charm, according to the sources. A follow-through. Many people charm by promising favors, contacts, or opportunities, yet they fail to deliver.
And that's where the trust breaks down. It turns a friend into an enemy.
The true charmer matches words with deeds. They deliver on promises. In a world full of bluff and smoke, that subtle, reliable helpfulness is the ultimate charm. It builds quiet, profound trust, ensuring their flattery is backed by substance.
We now move into the dynamics of control. We're focusing on distance, denial, and mystery, the essential tools for sustaining desire. Let's start with the coquette, who masters the alternation of hot and cold.
The coquette operates on a powerful, almost perverse psychological principle. Never allow total satisfaction.
The golden rule is delayed gratification.
Right. If conquest is easy, the value is low. Human beings are inherently excited by what is denied us, what we feel we cannot fully possess.
It seems so counterintuitive. Why does denial deepen attachment instead of just causing frustration and abandonment?
Because the coquette alternates. They master the hot and cold treatment. You have to look at Josephine and Napoleon.
Okay, a classic case.
Josephine knew exactly how to ignite his obsessive devotion by alternating passionate, pleading letters with periods of absolute silence or flirtation with other men.
So he never knew where he stood.
Never. Her occasional sadness or strategic anger just deepened his attachment because he constantly felt he needed to win her back. This cycle of push and pull keeps the initiative entirely in the coquette's hands. It makes a target feel they are constantly pursuing.
The target's anger or frustration, therefore, is not a sign of failure for the coquette.
No, it's a measure of success.
It's the sure sign of enslavement.
Exactly. If they are angry, they are emotionally invested. The coquette never chases, never shows jealousy, because that would signal dependence. Instead, they incite jealousy through triangulation.
How does that work?
By subtly signaling interest in a third party, even another friend or a colleague. It exploits the target's vanity and competitive desire to prove they are the most worthy.
Let's talk about the extreme version of this, the cold coquette, the one who relies on pure, absolute self-containment.
Figures like Andy Warhol or the philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti, they remain aloof, elusive, and profoundly self-contained.
Warhol's famous blankness.
His refusal to offer anything but non-committal answers like, I just do it because I like it. It forced everyone around him to project their own meaning and fight intensely for his attention. This coolness, this self-sufficiency is tremendously compelling.
And this brings us to a really complex psychological concept, Freudian narcissism and the coquette.
Right. Freud observed that the narcissistic woman, the woman who is self-contained and seems utterly complete without external validation, often has the greatest effect on men.
Why is that?
Because she reminds the man of his own blissful, self-contained narcissistic phase of childhood.
Oh, okay.
The victim finds the coquette's self-involvement enviable. He hopes that by contact, he might recapture that feeling of uncomplicated, self-sufficient bliss. They become hungry for the slightest sign of recognition, constantly offering service or gifts, hoping to pierce that perfect self-containment.
So the pursuit isn't really about sex. It's about restoring an inner lost harmony.
Absolutely. The victim wants to win her attention to prove his worth and stability.
Kicking that self-containment even further, we have the star, the modern icon who operates beyond mortal comprehension.
The star is a product of mass media. It's designed to recreate a dream world. Their primary task is to etherealize themselves.
What does that mean, etherealize?
They must appear distant. Their actions have to seem loose and disconnected from rational thought, seeming to flow from the unconscious. They are not people. They are beautiful, flickering images, goddesses to be worshipped.
And this demands the cultivation of the ambiguous, often blank face.
That blankness, you see it in Garbo, Dietrich, or even political figures like JFK, is strategic. It allows the masses to read into them whatever they desire,
They become a beautiful, empty screen.
onto which every person projects their perfect fantasy. Marlene Dietrich, for instance, maintained enough distance to continually mold her look, creating what the sources call sex without gender, a mesmerizing passive object open to endless fetishization.
They seem like creatures of pure artifice, yet this artificiality generates profound, real emotion.
Because they never seem to be struggling or worried or overly defined. This ambiguity is what makes them appear immortal, larger than life. The perfect precursor to this modern phenomenon was the 18th century charlatan, Count Saint-Germain.
He seems to embody every quality of the star decades before the concept even existed.
He did. Saint-Germain was the master of ambiguous self-presentation. His age was unknown, he spoke many languages with an unplaceable accent, he always wore spectacular jewels and black clothing.
And he never made great claims.
No, his power was entirely insinuation. When asked who he was, he'd only say, perhaps. When he died, no one believed it. He was a mystery wrapped in an aesthetic, proving that people will project immense power onto someone who refuses to define themselves.
We've established who the successful agents of desire are, but the source material gives us these crucial counterexamples. And, knowing what not to do is often as valuable as knowing what to do. So let's look at the anti-seducers.
The anti-seducer is the perfect lesson in failure. The root cause of their repellence is profound insecurity and self-absorption.
They're just locked inside their own heads.
Pathologically unable to grasp the psychology of another person, which means they fail the most basic requirement of seduction. Focused, individualized attention on the target. They impose their needs and their anxieties, closing themselves off instantly.
So they repel because they actively stir up resistance, rather than gently lowering it. The first example given is the windbag.
The windbag. They break the spell through excessive talk, usually about themselves. Seduction requires lightness, but the windbag weighs everything down, constantly drawing attention to their own opinions and achievements.
It demonstrates a deep-rooted selfishness.
It does. They lack that essential inner voice that whispers, am I boring you? Or is this what the target wants to hear? They are obsessed with filling the space, showing zero interest in the target's internal world.
And their need to talk constantly is often fueled by that underlying insecurity, right? A need to validate themselves verbally.
Absolutely. Seduction thrives on insinuation and silence, allowing the target's mind to wander. The windbag destroys all possibility of fantasy by drowning the target in banal facts and self-centered narratives.
Then we have the neglector, whose failure is the opposite of the windbag's intrusion. It's pure absence.
Right. The neglector breaks the spell through prolonged, insensitive inattention, which, over time, just breeds hatred.
The historical example is Claudius and his wife Messalina.
A brutal one. Claudius was notoriously oblivious to his wife, paying her virtually no attention whatsoever. His self-absorption and insensitivity became second nature.
So his neglect wasn't an act of strategic denial, like the coquettes.
No, not at all.
It was genuine apathy.
And this is devastating to the target's ego. Messalina became notorious for her affairs, driven by the intense frustration and provocation of being utterly ignored by the man who was supposed to be the center of her world.
Nothing is more infuriating than sustained inattention.
It's an insult that the target feels they must rectify, usually by seeking attention elsewhere.
And finally, the sources list a host of other repulsive traits that are all linked to neediness.
Yes, complaining, whining, actively appealing for sympathy, these are not seen as charming weaknesses.
They're seen as manipulative.
Exactly. Manipulative attempts at emotional blackmail. Any display of weakness has to be strategic, like the rake's use of vulnerability or the natural's innocence. All other forms of neediness must be ruthlessly suppressed because they instantly make the seducer seem burdensome and less than ideal. The goal is to be a source of pleasure and elevation, not a source of pity.
Having defined the agents and the anti-agents, let's look at the overarching strategic moves necessary to orchestrate a seduction over time. The sources insist that the seduction must begin at an angle, indirectly.
This is the rule of the spider's web. Direct contact instantly raises suspicion and resistance. You must haunt the periphery of the target's life.
Create space for maneuverability by being initially unthreatening.
The spider finds an innocuous corner, spins an almost invisible web, and waits for the victim to walk into it. The indirect approach means approaching the target's friend first, or engaging them in a group setting before focusing your attention.
And within that indirect approach, we find the critical difference between persuasion and insinuation.
Right. Direct persuasion using arguments, facts, logical statements is irritating. It makes people defensive.
Insinuation, however.
Insinuation is a subtle hint dropped in a banal remark, designed to register in the target's unconscious mind, bypassing all that rational resistance.
This is genius because the insinuated idea appears to the target as if it originated in their own mind.
Exactly. The source quotes Ninon de L'Enclos. A woman is much better persuaded that she is loved by what she guesses than by what she is told. You are planting a seed, not building a house.
And once that resistance is lowered, the next move is to create a need. The sources call it creating the wound.
Which harkens back to the mythology of love itself. Love, eros, is the child of contrivance, which is cunning, and poverty, which is need. The seducer must skillfully create that sense of poverty in the target.
So you aim at the soft spot, the chink in their self-esteem.
Making them feel they lack something vital that only you can provide.
So if a target is deeply bored and secretly feels their life is meaningless, you don't offer them a job. You just innocently bring up the tedium of their life until they feel their lack profoundly.
Like Don Juan's seducing the village girl. He didn't promise her the world. He made her acutely aware of how horribly provincial and dull her current existence was.
And he contrasted it sharply with his exotic glamour.
Right. The goal is to stir an anxiety or a pain that can only be relieved by involvement with you. You position yourself as the exotic cure for their inner discontent.
As the seduction advances, the strategy shifts toward confusing the victim's sense of reality through the strategic use of illusion and spectacle.
People naturally daydream. They do it to compensate for the difficulties and banalities of life. Seduction creates the total illusion the victim can finally live out their repressed fantasies through the seducer.
So you have to isolate them from their past reality.
And immerse them in your constructed world.
And the ultimate historical example of constructed reality has to be the Potemkin illusion.
Prince Potemkin was the ultimate ideal lover on a political scale for Empress Catherine the Great. She desperately yearned to be seen as a progressive ruler who was building a grand, functioning empire.
And during her tour of newly acquired territories,
Potemkin created the infamous Potemkin villages, dazzling, spectacular realities designed to make her see her dreams coming true.
the cost of the illusion was immense, but the psychological effect was priceless.
Catherine insisted everything was glorious, even when there were signs contradicting the spectacle. Her mind actively filled in the picture because the illusion confirmed her deepest ideal of herself. This emphasizes that people want to believe the fantasy.
Truth is irrelevant.
The emotional spectacle is everything.
This highlights the importance of detail and sensuous effect over simple truth or lofty words.
Absolutely. The senses must be filled. Details matter. Rituals, colorful objects, ambiance. Think of Empress Dowager Cixi, dazzling Western diplomats' wives with specific colors, textures, and elaborate rituals, making them feel utterly disoriented and mesmerized.
Or the way Yang Kuei-fei.
Used subtle perfume, sheer silk gowns, and studied movement that turned Emperor Menghuang into a distracted baby, completely devoted to sensory pleasure. The meticulous gesture and the thoughtful, sensuous gift are far more convincing than 1,000 lofty words about true love.
Finally, we arrive at the most high-stakes, controlling strategy, alternating pleasure and pain. The coquette's hammer applied across the entire process.
This is fundamental to generating true, intense passion. Passion fulfilled often feels like suffering before it feels like happiness.
The likelihood of suffering must be great.
Because suffering alone reveals the total significance of the beloved object, you must generate emotional turmoil, not constant comfort.
Why do people who are comfortable in their lives often secretly long for that turmoil?
People with easy lives often feel a gnawing sense of spiritual monotony, or even guilt. They secretly yearn for a mental thrashing or a dramatic experience that makes them feel alive. The hardness-kindness tactic exploits this perfectly.
How is that tactic deployed?
You alternate harshness, subtle digs, implicit criticisms, a moment of coldness, with intense kindness. This lowers the target's resistance because they constantly strive to return to the kindness, working harder to please the seducer to ward off the pain.
The journalist Oriana Fallaci famously used this interviewing technique.
A great modern example. She would ruthlessly challenge and critique her subjects, only to follow up with a moment of intense, flattering focus, leaving them utterly dependent on her for validation.
That dynamic leads right up to the emotional brink, which the sources call the precipice symbol.
The goal is to lead the target as close to the emotional or sexual edge as possible, but then pull back. Let them feel the rush of dizziness and fear.
Like standing on the edge of a cliff, where the fear and the temptation to fall headlong are mixed.
There is no thrill without fear. This extreme tension ratchets up the target's desire until they are desperate for release.
And that desperation sets the stage for the delayed climax, the summer storm.
When the target is absolutely ready to surrender, the seducer must momentarily hold back, forcing the victim to take the final active step of pursuit.
Because if the climax is delivered too quickly, the tension just flags.
And the victim remains passive. The climax, when it finally comes, must be sudden, overwhelming, and intense, like a summer storm breaking after a long, oppressive stillness. It offers immense physical and psychological relief after a period of intense denial and tension, and that release cements the attachment.
So to summarize this entire deep dive, seduction is a sophisticated process. It requires immense patience, focus, and a total commitment to strategic thinking.
It demands that the seducer step entirely outside of their own needs and step into the victim's mind, playing it like a finely tuned instrument, constantly surprising them and creating emotional cycles to avoid the stagnation and boredom that kills desire.
And as the seduction finds its target, the target inevitably begins the process of idealization.
This is the final, involuntary psychological step. Crystallization. Stendhal's metaphor perfectly captures this.
Explain it.
Imagine pulling a leafless, ordinary branch from a salt mine only to find it instantly covered in brilliant, sparkling diamonds. The victim takes the seducer, the basic branch, and endows them with a galaxy of scintillating diamonds, projecting 1,000 perfections onto them.
So even the rake's dangerous vices are poeticized. Even the coquette's aloofness becomes a mysterious strength.
Yes. The victim's mind refuses to see the reality, transforming flaws into compelling features. The idealization process is unavoidable in deep attachment. The sources are clear. The only thing that cannot be idealized is sheer mediocrity.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward. If every successful seduction, whether it's social, political, or romantic, relies on the creation of fantasy and the poeticization of the seducer,
Which it does.
then the core lesson of this entire deep dive is that true power in human interaction isn't really about honesty or sincerity. It's about mastering the art of the projected image and the calculated emotional response necessary to elevate yourself beyond the realm of the ordinary.
It's the difference between being a branch and being a diamond-covered monument.
Something profound to mull over the next time you find yourself fascinated by a dandy or caught in the emotional whirlwind of a coquette. You've been listening to The Deep Dive.